question I just asked. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm grounded. I spend a lot of time making sure that I'm grounded. So I'm very careful about my social media intake, and I put an emphasis on making sure that I meditate every day. I take a walk and I see some greenery. Um, yeah. So it's part of how I roll.
Um, when it comes to everything that's going on um, outside, and I'm like you, I try to limit social media and whatnot because there's so much hate and spewed out there. But on outside of that, there's so much important topics being discussed right now, literally on the streets in front of us. How do you take what is going on, which is a very mature subject, and relay that into how families can talk about that with kids?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think it's really great that you're doing this segment on this because parents don't know everything. I mean, we're just trying to do the best we can. So it's great to get some information. And there's a website, a resource that I want to suggest to people.
Mm-hmm.
It's called embracerace.org. But what I would suggest, first of all, is that number one, we have to reassure our children that they are safe, that we are going to keep them safe. That's the first thing. Number two, we need to talk about what's happening in terms of fairness because we know kids are very, 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 very concerned about fairness. So we want to put it in terms that they can understand. Now, if you have a child of color, especially if you have a Black child, then I also want you to talk with that child in ways that empower him or her or them. So when we give children information, we don't want to give them information that will make them feel like there's nothing that they can do and that they're not safe and the world sucks. That is not a service to our children. What we want to do is give them information in a way that empowers them, that lets them know that depending on their age, that what we are personally doing to alter the situation to make it more fair, that explains a little bit about what other tactics that other people are taking, some of which we may agree with, some of which we may not agree with. um, but I think the important thing to emphasize is that it's important for all of us to do our part to make things more fair, and that they're safe and we love them. And I think especially for, again, for children of color, it's important to really also cultivate a positive sense of their racial identities so they don't only associate it with scary things happening to them.
For families who for white families, putting it bluntly, and I mean, let's call a spade a spade. There aren't there are a lot of areas in this region that are majority white, and a lot of the black communities are within the city, and that's unfortunate, and that's just the way it is. So for the families that this may be their first introduction into race, how is that addressed at the family dinner table?
Yeah. Well, honestly, I think it's the responsibility of the adults to do some reading or some TED Talk viewing.
Mm-hmm.
You got to bone up. If you're just coming into this for the first time, you've got to bone up. And honestly, one of the best ways to bone up is children's books because they're short and they're usually written in a way that they don't presume you're just going to keep reading because you have to. They presume they have to keep your attention. So there's some children's authors who you would love to read who are writing in this vein, helping kids to understand things like justice. And one of them is Becky Bertha, and that's B as in boy, IRTHA.
Mm-hmm.
A number of children's books that feature Black characters that show them taking on social norms and standing up with dignity and having a sense of togetherness. So I think white families need to see those kinds of images, and I think white families need to start talking about, okay, So we're of European descent, and there's a specific history that we've had in this country that's different than people of other ethnic backgrounds.
If I'm going to you, and forgive the role play here, for example, because I'm not good at it, but uh, I go to you, mommy, daddy. Why are people yelling outside right now? What? Why are people fighting? What is going on? Should I be worried? Should I be scared? I don't know what's happening.
Yeah. Again, the first thing is to reassure safety. So, honestly, physically close to your child on your lap. Say there are people who are protesting right now. That's called an uprising because they really want their voices to be heard. So that's part of what's going on out there. And then there's some other things that are happening out there that are, that mommy wouldn't do or daddy wouldn't do. But, that's part of when things kind of um, get out into the streets. A lot of different people start doing things. So I want you to know, my child, is that you are safe and that we are doing things in our family to make things more fair for everyone.
What can someone? What can a family do today to to help the situation, that to push out racism, to fight for equal rights the best that they can? What can a family do today to really help that matter if they want to get involved in a family way?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think the first thing is that the adults actually have to do some research. And I don't mean you have to read 1,000-page book. But for example, Ibram Kendi, he's a historian. He wrote this book called How to Be an Anti-Racist. And they have a young adult version, like a teenager
Hmm.
version. So get out that book and look at some of those concrete suggestions that he makes that you can do. I think what you need to do is to actually look at, well, how is bias playing out in my house? I think you need to ask that question. How is racial bias playing out in my house?